How great is The Great Hunt? That's right, it's Wheel of Time time. Time for the Wheel of Time. Time for my thoughts on the Wheel of Time. The Great Hunt, Book 2 in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. I read The Eye of the World, the first book, way back in March, and I have finally moved on to the second book now. You might have seen that I did a first impressions video on The Great Hunt a couple weeks back, where I was just saying what my initial thoughts were about the first 10 chapters or so. And if you've seen that video, then you know that it set a pretty high expectation for the rest of the book. I was pretty excited with the opening of The Great Hunt. Really solid foundation for this read. Just a quick note on spoilers. I'm gonna go for a non-spoiler section and then possibly a more involved spoiler section where I dive a bit deeper into some things with a full spoilers, but I am going to assume that if you're watching this video that you have read The Eye of the World. And I'll still try to keep it free of like major spoilers, but you know, I'm assuming if you're watching a review for the second book then you have read the first. I think that's a fair assumption to make. So if you haven't, just proceed with caution is what I'll say. And with the spoiler warning done, let's get into it. There's sort of two main plot lines that we follow through this book. One of them concerns Rand and the boys, mainly Rand, and then plot B concerns Nynaeve and Egwene going off to the White Tower to learn more about the world of the Aes Sedai. There's a couple other like mini plot lines going on as well, but those are the main two. For the most part, I was enjoying the Rand storyline a lot more until sort of like the end of the book. They sort of switched places, and then the Nynaeve and Egwene stuff became more compelling, and that was the stuff I was like reading excited to get. Oh, when we're gonna jump back to that bit, I want to know more about what's going on there. As I mentioned in my first impressions video, I'm liking Rand a lot more. He's still a very generic fantasy protagonist, but hey, that's what I came to this series for. Some good old generic fantasy. Not generic, but like, you know, it's staples of the genre. And to have this guy who's got a destiny and he doesn't want to do his destiny and he's having a big suck about it, I'm here for it. I do like that even though we're still very early on in the series, I can feel the growth in maturity from the characters, especially Rand. Feels like he's a lot less naive than he was in book one, even just one book later. And obviously he's got a lot of doubts and things to contend with in this book, and sort of feels like he's not in control of his own life, and he's got a lot of internal conflict regarding that, which parts is kind of whiny, but also like you get it. It makes sense that he would feel this way about it. So yeah, definitely enjoyed Rand, and another reason that I enjoyed that storyline so much is because Loial plays a much bigger role in this book than he did in the last book, and especially in that storyline. He is with Rand on the journey that he goes on, and obviously Loial is a great character. He was one of my personal highlights from the first book, and so I was, you know, delighted to see that we are getting more of him as the books continue. I also like that we're seeing a little bit more depth to Loial's character. Like, he obviously comes across as this very like cheery, optimistic, friendly guy, and there still is that, but there's also like a bit more going on behind the surface, and we get to explore that more because we get to spend more time with Loial, explore his friendship with Rand and how they sort of grow a bit closer over the course of The Great Hunt. All of that, really enjoyed it. I feel like I have to mention one of the characters that they are traveling with in this book is called Hurin, and I don't know for sure, but I assume that that is a nod to Hurin from the Silmarillion in this story, The Children of Hurin. Just a classic little nod to good old J.R.R. Tolkien over there. That is something that I am noticing pop up in Robert Jordan's work. When I was talking about the last book, I talked about how the Mountains of Mist was a bit on the nose, and there's also, I forgot to mention in the last review, but the Mountains of Doom is also one of the mountain ranges in the Wheel of Time. These aren't criticisms, by the way. I'm not saying like, well, Robert Jordan is stealing from Tolkien. No, I just find it funny. Something else that I really enjoyed about this Rand and Loial storyline, which dominates the majority of this book, is concerning what is going on with these two. And they encounter something called a portal stone, which takes them to like kind of an alternate universe, but it's more like a universe that could have happened that never happened. It's like I guess a projected universe, and it's really well described. It's really unsettling the way that Robert Jordan describes this world that they end up in. The just atmosphere of it, the fact that everything feels a little hazy, nothing feels like it's alive there. Robert Jordan does a really great job with the description of that and the feelings that it conjures. And using this portal stone, they are actually able to travel further in their actual world, because they find another portal stone and get out back to their own world. And then they have traveled much further than they would have if they had stayed in their own world. It's basically another form of fast travel, like the Waygates that we got introduced to in book one. I thought it was cool that there are like multiple versions of these sort of magical little things that can get you from place to place quicker. A part of me is wondering if, like, in every subsequent book we're gonna get another different form of fast travel. Like, it was waygates in the first one, it was portal stones in here. It's been mentioned a few times that, like, the Aes Sedai have the lost art of traveling, which I assume is just, like, outright teleportation. Maybe that's gonna come up in the later books. I can definitely imagine that happening at some point. And then, I don't know, maybe there's some sort of Monsters Inc. door system that they'll encounter as well. 14 different forms of fast travel, each one introduced in a different book. I would love that if that is actually what happens. One of my criticisms for the Eye of the World was the fact that we had so much focus on Rand and only like a couple of dips into the other characters' points of view. For the most part, we are completely within Rand's perspective in the first book, but I like that this book is taking deviating plot lines and giving other characters a bit of spotlight as well, and we're getting more POVs, more hints into characters' psyches apart from Rand. We got more Perrin POVs, more Nynaeve, even some more minor characters like the guy who was running the White Cloaks. I enjoyed that we got to experience that. It feels like the world is just starting to expand a little more, and like the characters that our main gang have encountered now have sort of been woven into the pattern, as they would say. It definitely feels like things are starting to be set in motion, and you can sort of feel like they might not necessarily be coming together right now, but you can feel like they're on their way. I think I liked Matt a bit more in this book than I did in the previous book. I think he, as well as Rand and Perrin, the whole main cast, has matured slightly. Might also just be because Barney Harris is doing such an incredible job playing him in the show. That version of Matt, the show version, is a lot more sympathetic than the Matt that we first meet in the books. Also the fact that Matt has less of a major role in The Great Hunt than he did in Eye of the World. He again seemed a bit more mature, a bit more aware of the severity of some of the things that are going on. Going back to Nynaeve and Egwene, their storyline was one that I very much enjoyed. We obviously meet Liandrin, the I suppose leader of the Red Aja. I don't really know how the Ajas work that well. She is definitely an antagonist who you know from the start is an antagonist, and you're like, oh, when she starts to sort of get involved in things, you're like, what's she up to? There's clearly an ulterior motive here. What's she gonna do? No, she's gonna lead people into a trap, and they've fallen for it. She was definitely a very good antagonistic force in that storyline. However, not my favorite antagonist from that storyline, and the book overall. That would be I believe it's Sean-Chan? Sean-Chan? Anyway, they are invading on the coast, and oh boy, these guys, I hated these guys so much. Robert Jordan just did a really great job making these guys feel so insidious. The way they are so casual about slavery and trying to bring it to the continent that Wheel of Time is set on. Just so nonchalant about like dehumanizing the people who live here. It just makes them so repulsive and loathsome. And like there's a bit where Nynaeve confronts one and says, you're worse than the Dark One's minions. And it's like, yeah, no, she's right. At least Baalzamon has some style. He has some finesse to him, you know? You lot need to just get out of here. Circling back to Moiraine, we get some more Moiraine POV chapters. I like that we're seeing into her and we can actually see like behind the surface, she doesn't have all the answers despite the sort of front that she puts on. She is like just as insecure and doubtful as any other, but because she is an Aes Sedai and because she wants the prophecies to be fulfilled in the way that they need to be. Man, it's hard to talk about this without spoiling it. I like that we get to see that glimpse behind the curtain of her character as well. Overall, it felt a little less urgent than the first book did, which is sort of like the thing that I like the most about the first book is like it really hammered home how urgent the situation is and how fast the characters need to move. There's still a sense of urgency in The Great Hunt, but I feel like as it sort of gets towards the middle, towards the end, it becomes a little less intense. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, it doesn't have to be there all the time, and it's a 14-book series. If it was like that all the time, then it would get exhausting. So I understand that a break needs to be taken, but yeah, no, there were parts where it felt like, do we have time to do this? Shouldn't we be like doing the thing that needs to get done? But overall, I was very much gripped by the story. Along with this and the show coming out, it sort of like really got me a lot more excited to continue on this series. Dragon Reborn is quite high up on my TBR. I did have a very good time with The Great Hunt. And now I suppose there's a couple of spoiler things that I can say some things about, so consider this your spoiler warning if you have not yet read The Great Hunt. So Rand is the Dragon Reborn, and in the non-spoiler thing I was kind of hinting at that. I think I was actually mentioned at the end of the last chapter in book 1, but still, I liked the way that finding out that he is that affects his psyche, the fear that he has that he might be going mad if he channels too much, and yet he keeps ending up in these situations where he needs to channel, like he needs to channel to use the portal stones. I did think when they were like finding the other one and Rand was like, oh, I don't want to channel because, you know, I'm a male channeler, that I might go mad and I might kill my friends and break the world or whatever. I did think, why don't you just try going to sleep again? That's what got you here in the first place. Why not just give that a go? Have a little snooze. Don't know why no one suggested that. I thought that would have been a good idea, but I guess not. Obviously, the lady that they meet in that world, who is fighting the Grolm when they first meet her. What's her name? Selena? Serene? Knew from the first moment she appeared that there was something up with her. The reveal that we get at the end that, oh yeah, she's one of the Forsaken. I didn't know she was going to be that, but there was definitely something sketchy about her. The way she kept trying to like get Rand to hold the horn, and the fact that everyone got so hung up on her, it felt like there was sort of like a siren call thing going on. I was just like, Rand, you need to focus. Ignore her. She's not important, and she's probably working for the Dark One. There you go. She was. And I liked how Rand is doing the classic sort of protagonist who is running from his destiny, or trying to run from his destiny while inadvertently running headfirst into it, and he ends up fighting the Dark One in the clouds above this city, and now everyone knows that he's the Dragon Reborn. Speaking of that fight, I guess that fight is important for like the overall story, but Alzamon's appearances in this book did feel somewhat incongruous, I guess is maybe the right word, because it felt like the Sean-chan and what they were doing was like the main threat for this specific book. Obviously there's Padan Fain stealing the horn and the dagger, and that's also relevant, and that's something we need to deal with, but the Sean-chan's invasion really felt like that was amping up to be the main threat for like the climax of the book. But then every once in a while Balsamon would just appear in like a dream, and then he just suddenly pops up in the climax to fight Rand. I didn't dislike it, but it did just feel like, oh, and also Balsamon is here. Say hi, everyone. I really liked meeting Tom again. Knew he wasn't dead. They talked about it way too much for it to actually be the case that he did die, so I was glad to see him return, and I really liked the characterization of him. I mean, he's just a great character, and he was really great in this book in the parts that he was in. I like that we also saw Min again from that inn in the first book. Fun to see her again. I liked that we got to experience more of her character, and she's one of the characters that we got a POV for. Enjoyed seeing inside her mind and like getting to know a bit more of her character. I hope that she becomes like a mainstay of the series going forward, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on with her. I enjoyed reading her chapters. I enjoyed the sort of the gang of Nynaeve and Egwene and Min and Elaine. I liked the way that they all bounced off each other and became the sort of friend group, and then ended up in this threat with the Sean-chan, and then they had to rescue Egwene. That whole plotline like really took over as like the main plot from the book that I was interested in when that whole thing started happening, and then we were cutting back to Rand and Hurin, and I was like, this is cool. I want to rescue Egwene now. Let's get back to that. And just once more, like the Sean-chan and their leashed ones. Ugh. They made the White Cloaks and the Trollocs look like a walk in the park. Oh, I did enjoy. There was a bit like quite early on where in Rand's internal thought, it was just like, it's only a Fade and a couple of Trollocs, and I was like, only? Did I just think only a Fade and a couple of Trollocs? Like, a couple months ago, that would be the worst thing I could possibly imagine, but now it's just like, yeah, whatever. This is just Tuesday. I thought that was funny. I really enjoyed how Rand was trying so hard not to get involved in the Kyrian politics. It was like, I don't want to deal with all of this political intrigue stuff. I really enjoyed this take on political intrigue where like every little detail, or even just not doing an action, gets interpreted and then gets filled into the gossip mill, and everyone thinks that everyone's trying to compete for power no matter what you do. And then Rand starts throwing his invitations into the fire. I really enjoyed just how like unimpressed, how like completely uninterested he was in all of that, and yet he kept getting caught up in the strings of it. That was very entertaining. Such a well done moment was when Ingtar and Mat and Perrin finally show up to the city where Rand is staying, right after Padan Fain manages to steal the horn and the dagger back, after they went to all this length to get it from their camp and then to get to this city. But obviously Padan Fain manages to steal the horn and the dagger back, and then right after he does that and then the inn burns down, that's when Ingtar and Mat and Perrin show up, and it was just such a if they'd arrived a day earlier, it was a very well executed moment of a triumph then a fall. I very much enjoyed the tragedy of that whole thing, like we were so close and then yet so far. And Rand's reaction of just like sitting down in the street and just laughing because of how ridiculously close they were to actually winning and then just losing it all in just a moment. That was a very well done scene. Also playing into Rand's like anxiety about himself going mad, that all worked really well. It's not outright stated in the book, but I'm 90% sure, I'm 99% sure that Liandrin is in fact part of the Black Aja, because she does the whole I Aes Sedai can't lie thing, and she says that the Black Aja they exist, and if you don't do what I say right now, then they're gonna come for you and kill you in the night. And I know that because I'm one of them. Was the sort of the unspoken but implied thing that I got. Maybe she's not Black Aja, maybe she's just like a real meanie, but I'm pretty sure it will be revealed as the series goes on that she is part of the Black Aja. I got that impression, I got that vibe from her, you know? Okay, I think that's all of the spoiler things that I wanted to talk about. So did The Great Hunt overall meet the high expectations set by the start of it? I would say absolutely yes. I really enjoyed The Great Hunt as a book, a lot more than I was expecting to actually. I wasn't expecting a book that's like so early on in such a big series to hook me in as much as it did. Like obviously the first one is gonna have to do a weighty job to get people in, but the second, I guess, episode in the series, I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did, but I was pleasantly surprised. I really was hooked by like everything that's going on in this book, and then even when my interest in the Rand storyline started to drop off a little bit, the Nynaeve storyline took over and was like, oh, this is great, I want to read more about this now. So in conclusion, The Great Hunt, second book in the Wheel of Time, rather fittingly, I thought, was pretty great. If you've read The Great Hunt, let me know what you thought about it down below in the comments. If you like this video, please leave it a like. If you want to see more from me, please do subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and as always, I will see you in my next one. She is definitely an